Howdy and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be working on a 1660 Massey Ferguson that we're going to have to put a clutch in. Hopefully that's what it is. Of course won't move at all, so it presents one of two options. Either the clutch itself, the disc has just exploded, or worst case scenarios, the main input shaft of the transmission has broke, because we have no forward gears, we have no PTO, no function, so that, pretty much leads you, to one of two. So we're going to get into it. Of course, first thing we did was pull the hood. You need to get all your electrical, your throttle cables, all your different hydraulic lines, all that stuff disconnected so that you can get it ready to split. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. And of course, like I say, I've already gotten the hood off, so we're going to go into removing all the electrical and getting all that unplugged so that we're ready to go. Of course, I like to use, on like hydraulic lines and stuff, I like to use different color zip ties, and you can you put one on one end and one on the other end to correspond that's where that line went. And that way, when you get ready to put everything back together, you just match your colors up, red to red, yellow to yellow, blue to blue, however the case may be. Another good thing to always keep on hand is any kind of old coffee cans, anything that's got a good lid. It's always good to keep them, to put all your bolts in. That way you can keep everything together so things don't get misplaced, because a lot of times, like on a clutch job especially, you may be down waiting a couple days, on your parts to come in. So that way, like I say, it keeps everything together, and you don't have to worry about misplacing. Another good investment that I really suggest is these crimpers. They're made for like hydraulic line, or for like fuel lines, coolant lines, things of that nature. You can take and clamp them onto your line and then close them, and that lid closes off so you don't leak when you disconnect your fuel line, or you disconnect the coolant line, or anything along those lines. That'll really save you some time and save a big. Okay guys, I'm gonna do a little close-up just to kind of show you some different things that that you'll need to deal with when preparing to split your tractor. Of course, first thing you're gonna look at is where your transmission and your bell housing mate together. That's where the engine and the bell housing mate. That's where you're going to split it. So you just kind of look at everything that's here or connected back there that needs to be disconnected, and that'll kind of give you an idea of what all you need to to disconnect to be able to split. Like your main hydraulic line, we're going to separate it right here, which usually if you just take your clamp loose, your line's going to stay in place, but as you roll your front half forward, it'll slide out, so you're good. Of course, you've got a line here, and your steel line here. I keep in available cap plugs to be able to plug these off. I've got the male and female JIC ends. That way, when you disconnect, you can screw the male end and your female end on. Keeps you from losing a whole lot of hydraulic fluid, which will save you some money, unless you're planning on changing it anyway. Which it's kind of a good time, since you've got everything disconnected anyway, to go ahead and change your fluid and filter while you're this far in. But like I say, we'll go through all that. I've disconnected the throttle cables. All of the electrical is disconnected and laid back out of the way. In this particular case, the fuel tank will be able to stay sitting right where it is. It'll go with the engine. Another important thing that you need to do when preparing this thing to get it split is right here on the top of your front axle. Alright, we're pretty much ready to split the tractor now, so I want to kind of show you how I've got things set up, so you can kind of get an idea of how to brace everything, how to support everything. Of course, I've made these pedestals that work out real good versus, a lot of people use wood blocks, different things. But you want to get it, kind of underneath, kind of the center of your engine, which I need to move it back a little bit further. We'll put it about right in here to support the engine half. and then come in on your transmission end, and I'm in a good flat spot back towards the mid weight of the frame. And of course on this, all we're doing is going to support the rear part of the tractor with the floor jack, and then we'll roll the front half away. And of course it's very important, this really can't be done unless you're on a slab or a good hard surface. At the very least, I have done it before with using a sheet of 3/4 plywood for the jacks to to roll on. We've got all the bell housing bolts out, but just one on each side, and I wanted to kind of go over a couple things real quick before we actually roll the two halves apart. First thing is, I always put jack stands underneath the transmission end as well as the engine end, just in case, in the event it was to come off of your jack as you're rolling back, you've got something to catch. And also, I wanted to move over here and show you how I've got this block of wood wedged in on each side. That's what I was talking about wedging the axle, so that the engine won't try and pivot with you once it separates from the bell housing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take and sweep everything out of the way, make sure everything's good, and then we'll roll the two halves apart, and then we'll take a look at the clutch. See, we've got it split, and it's kind of what I was figuring. With this being a shuttle shift transmission, it doesn't actually have a clutch. What it uses is a coupler that bolts on the back of the flywheel, and then that, of course, slides up on the input shaft, and that's what drives your transmission. What's happened with this one, as you can see, you've got splines back here, but it's ate all the splines out. It's stripped out this coupler, so that's why we didn't have any transmission power or PTO or anything else. So what we're going to do now is, I'll get the parts ordered. We're going to put a new rear main seal in it while we've got it this far, and then we'll put the flywheel back on, the new coupler, slide the two halves back together, and it'll be back in business. The procedure's still pretty much the same. If you had a clutch, you're going to do the same thing as what we've done here. It's just once you split it, you'd have your flywheel and your clutch disc, pressure plate, throw-up bearing, and all that in the bell housing. Whereas, like I say, this is just a coupling that drives the hydraulic transmission. So we'll get all that ordered, and then we'll be ready to put this thing back together. Welcome to the channel. Today we're looking at a Kubota M125X that has a pretty pronounced knock in the engine. After checking it over a little bit and listening to it, kind of doing a little diagnosing, I feel like it's more of an injector knock than it is like a rod knock or anything like that. Traditionally, with a rod knock, if you break your injector. Hello everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today we're looking at a Kubota M125X that has a pretty good knock to it that sounds like a rod knock, but I've done some diagnosing on it, checking some different things, and to me it's more of an injector knock than it is a rod knock. So what we're going to do is go ahead and pull the injectors and tear them down and take a look at them and see what's going on, because the Kubotas, I ran into a lot of them that have this particular knock to them, and it ends up being a broke spring in the injector. So before I go into pulling this engine out of the frame and tearing it down to rebuild, I want to be for sure. So we're going to go ahead and pull the injectors and check them, and if that's not the case, then at least we've ruled that out. So that's where we're going to start. Okay, of course, as you can see, to get to the injectors, we got a lot of stuff that's going to have to come off. We're going to have to get the steering motor and all this frame and everything off to be able to get down in there to get them out of there. So I'm going to get started pulling everything loose and get all this out. I mean, it's a good thing. Either way we go, this stuff's going to have to come off. If we have to do an engine, or if we get lucky and it's just an injector, or maybe possibly a push rod, something like that. But we'll have to get everything out of the way so we can get down in there and get the injectors out and get the valve cover off. So I'm going to get started with that, and we'll see what we can get done here. We've got the steering motor and the hydraulic lines and everything out of our way. So now you can see your injectors, your return lines. You've got your injector lines that hook in, your return lines, they'll have to come off. And then we'll take these little brackets here off and pop the injectors up out of the hole. And then we'll also, while we're here, we're going to go ahead and pull the valve cover and run the valves and just see if we've got an issue there. So we'll go through that, and but of course, first thing we're going to do is take the air hose and blow all this debris and all back off, so that we don't take a chance on getting anything down into the injector holes or into the head underneath the valve cover. Once we get everything done, I'm gonna push this rag in so it keeps stuff out of the intake, and I'm also going to get another one and cap off and cover the intake on the turbo so that we don't get any contamination anywhere while we've got everything opened up. And like I say, we'll get all that off, and hopefully we find our issue so that we don't have to go any further into this engine. But if we do, then that's what we'll do. Alright, we're going to get these return lines loose, and when you do these, you want to make darn sure and keep up with these little banjo bolts, because they are costly to have to replace. And you want to kind of watch on your washer setup as to, like, it has banjos, and it's got these little split washers made so that it's for the top and the bottom. Some of them are going to be separate, and it's just the top and the bottom, but you want to try and make sure and keep up with these unless you've got replacements. Generally they'll stay on your line, so it's not not too big of a deal, but kind of just keep an eye out for them, because if you lose one, then you got to go hunting down replacements. You just get all 6, or in this case all 5, broke loose, and get them all pulled, and we can get your return lines out of the way. See, I like that one. It's got a separate one on it, so you'll have a loose one on the bottom instead of it being the one-piece setup like it originally started out to be. That one had broke, so kind of want to keep watch as you're pulling them out, so that you keep up with your returns. And of course, once you get all your bolts out of the way, then you can just pick your return rail up and just kind of set it over out of your way and get the rest of your washers off. That way you put them all together. That way it makes it easier when you get ready to go back together. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll pull these injector lines, go ahead and get them broke loose from all of your injectors, and then you'll pull these retainer caps off, get all those off. And then what I normally do is I spray the injectors down around the base of them with some penetrating oil and kind of let them soak for just a little bit. Makes it a little easier when you get ready to pull them out. I'm going to talk about the two different projects that we were working on here. On the 1620 Massey, of course, it ended up being the drive coupling that mates the flywheel to the input shaft on the transmission. We had to order that part, and I was just going to kind of go over, make it a little easier. Massey Ferguson's kind of one of those that it's hard to find parts for a lot of times, hard to find people that'll help you find parts a lot of times. So if you go to AGCO, it's agcopartsonline.com. That lets you access parts breakdowns for your particular tractor. You'll go in and put your your model, make model in, and you can go to your specific tractor and look up specific, whether it's engine parts or transmission parts or electrical, whatever. So that kind of gives you a place to go, if you're having trouble, finding what you're looking for. Now, of course, we'll get the parts in first of next week, and once we get them in, then we'll get going, putting it back together. It won't, we're going to put a new rear main seal in while we've got everything split, because it's just kind of stupid not to, in my eyes, because you're right there, and you're looking at a, $20 part. If you don't put it in 6 months later, it goes to leaking in there. You got to split the whole tractor again to do it. So I always like to put one in any time that I do a clutch job, or pretty much any time that you're going to split the tractor in half. It's a good idea to replace any seals or any wear parts inside the bell housing area, or parts that you had to remove to to take it apart. If there's something you see, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace it then. It'll save you a lot of headache, a lot of downtime later on. So that's what we're going to do with it. Well, like I say, we'll get the stuff in this next week, and then we'll get it put back together and slide the two halves back and fill it up with new hydraulic oil and everything, and have it done. Now the M125X Kubota that I was working on, we pulled the injectors out of it because it's got a knock, but it sounds to me like an injector knock. But I've pulled the number 5 injector, which is the one I was really suspecting we would find an issue with, because that was the cylinder that we were getting getting oil out of the around the exhaust manifold. So pulled it down, and I'm not really seeing a whole lot of visible wear on the injector nozzle itself. They're all dirty. They've kind of got a gall on the panels. So we're gonna go in next week and tear them all down, put new tips in them, and reset the pressures, put them back together, and we'll put them back in. And we're also going to go ahead and run the valves on the engine, just to kind of make sure we don't have an issue there. It'll kind of show if we run them, and it'll kind of show if we've got something going on. And then we get the valves run, then we're going to go ahead and do a compression test on the engine itself. That's another way to kind of see if you've got a bearing issue, or say a bent rod or something on a particular cylinder, because that particular cylinder you'll have a lower compression than on your others. So that's kind of our game plan, how I'm going to approach this to really diagnose it for sure, one way or another, whether we need to tear into it and do an in-frame, or whether we're going to find the problem before we get there. So that's what we're going to plan on doing, and we'll get started back on that first of the week, and we'll get a new video up posted. So everybody stay tuned, so so that you'll be able to kind of follow this through and see where we end up as to what the actual problem is, and what we have to do to fix it. So everybody stay with me, stay tuned, please subscribe, and hit the like button, and that way you'll get notified of the next video once I get it posted. So just we'll keep you posted, and you know, let's get to work on it.